Hi, my name's Russell Sturgis. Welcome to the sixth instalment in our series on how EAP works, and more to the point, how awareness and mindfulness works. Today I want to talk about the role that gratitude has in helping to develop mindfulness into its more whole expression. But I want to just recap briefly on what it is that we've been discussing over the last couple of blogs that we've presented. So we've been looking at a definition of mindfulness that suggests that mindfulness is in fact remembering in any encounter in the present moment that you have a choice. That means that instead of functioning out of habit and programming, that you have a choice between that, and sometimes that serves, most of the time it doesn't, and that you have been able to become aware of new ways of doing things. You've got the possibility of a new experience, which might be inner peace, for example, and you have created a series of strategies or behaviours that you could adopt, or states of attitude that you could align with that would help to sustain this idea of inner peace. So mindfulness is that you come to the point where you recognise that you have a choice between habit and new strategies, but more to the point that you understand what the impact of those choices are and the way in which that's going to either be a loving act or thought to yourself, to another, or to the planet, or not. So mindfulness is recognising this choice. What happens is that as you become more mindful of the loving choices and you begin to experience the consequences of having aligned with those choices, which means that there's a greater sense of stillness and inner peace, there's a greater momentum towards wanting to have more of that. And so what in fact we do is we begin to develop a new neural pathway. So the being strategic and developing a new reality in terms of what we want to experience is in fact beginning to imagine a new neural pathway. And so the moment that we start choosing to act in ways that align with that, we start to give strength to that neural pathway, and that in turn begins to weaken the old pathway. Of course, what happens is many of us find ourselves caught in between the two, and sometimes we resort to habit and programming, and other times we are clear and are able to make the choices, and we can get frustrated. And I talk about how we can be grateful for both of those situations. I write about that in the blog that goes with today's video. But I'd like to talk about how gratitude helps to reinforce the neural pathway. And I want to talk about what the elements of gratitude are and why being aware of all three of them are important. Let me start with a bit of a story. When I was a kid, I grew up in a home where prayer, particularly around mealtime, was a very important part of the culture of our family, and everyone had an opportunity to say a prayer, and it was not a rote prayer. So in other words, you had space to be able to speak the words that you wanted to, but invariably you would say that you were grateful for the food, and that you were thankful that it was able to contribute to your health and strength, and that type of thing. End of prayer. So there's an expressed thankfulness as part of the gratitude. Of course, what happens is you scoff down the meal, and it sort of fills the empty space. You get up from the table and go, and you're back out doing what you're doing. So mum's prepared the meal, she's plated the meal and served it up. Then we might have taken the plates to the sink, but we didn't generally wash up. Mum and Dad did, and back in those days, of course, there weren't dishwashers, well, certainly not in our home. And so that was the end of the story. If we were truly in gratitude, then it would be a very different story, because gratitude basically has three elements. The first one is thankfulness. So thankfulness would be expressed in the way where you could give a prayer and express gratitude for what it is that you have, and take the time to thank mum for preparing the food, and for dad maybe for having provided the food by virtue of the fact that his employment brought about the finances that made it possible for us to have the abundance that we had. So that was the thankful component of it. The appreciation is the next part of gratitude, and the appreciation would be that as you're eating the food, you would eat it with awareness, so that you would be able to really taste the food as you're eating it and enjoy the experience of the flavours and the experience of the different textures. And of course, these days we're much more educated about the way in which food can be appreciated, because we have shows like MasterChef. But here's this capacity for us to be able to fully be present to the food, which means that there's a true appreciation of it. Now, the third component of gratitude is returning kindness. So we've gone through the place where we've been able to express thankfulness for it. We've been able to acknowledge our gratitude. We've been able to show appreciation for it, which is this second dimension of gratitude. And the third one in this particular model that I'm talking about would be offering to hop up and clear the table and do the washing up, so that there's a real return of kindness for the fact that mum and dad had gone to the trouble to bring it to the table, that myself and my brothers could have hopped in and done the washing and the drying and put it all away, as a way of returning kindness. So gratitude has those three elements. It has the element of thankfulness, it has the element of appreciation, and then it has this element of returning kindness. So we talk about gratitude journals, for example, as a way of expressing gratitude. From this particular model, all that's doing is asking us to contribute in 1/3 of the way that we're able to when it comes to fully giving gratitude and appreciation for what happens. So when we're in this place of practicing mindfulness, when we experience that inner peace and that stillness and that joy in relationships that comes from living life more mindfully based on compassion and benevolence, we're able to really sit in the place of being thankful for being able to experience life in that way. Now, the appreciation is that we can truly be present with ourselves and with other people while we're in the experience of acting benevolently, or while we're in the experience of being compassionate. And then thirdly, returning kindness is the ability to, and there's two really subtle components to this, and one is that we allow others to give to us. So in other words, I'm going to suggest to you that part of returning kindness is actually being available to allow other people to be benevolent towards ourselves. And of course, the other component which is closely aligned with that is the ability that we can be truly aware of in our giving to others, that we don't overgive, that we don't go beyond our capacity, and so that there's a returning kindness in terms of how much we give. So giving the right amount, being able to expend the right amount of energy and resource from ourselves is something that requires us to have this awareness of our own worth, so we can give to ourselves and we can allow others to give to us from this perspective of returning kindness. Of course, if we're dealing with this concept of gratitude as it relates to other people, then it's about our capacity to give to others in those sorts of situations. So the more gratitude that you are able to bring each day, the more you're able to reinforce your experience of inner peace, the more you're reminded of the way in which you're being blessed in what it is that you're doing. Of course, the more that you're able to do that, the more you can continue to practice mindfulness, and these feed each other to the extent that and I've talked about this in our previous videos and blogs, is that there's a point where you start to have a default of mindfulness, or in mindfulness as is expressed as being devotion to service or devotion to benevolence and compassion. So that what happens is, as you practice more and more mindfulness, as you practice more and more gratitude, you feed the mindfulness, which in turn results in a default where there's a devotion to benevolence and compassion. The other thing that happens is that the more you're able to sit in the awareness of all that you're given in the experience, you become more aware of the abundance that you have in your life. So instead of coming from a place of scarcity, which is often the default of being in our habit and programming, when you come from this place of benevolence and compassion, you begin to experience and divine flow, and with that you begin to experience abundance. And so once again there's this capacity to be grateful for the abundance and to recognize the abundance of joy that you have, for example. But more than that, the fact that oftentimes you'll start to see that there's more abundance in your time, there's more abundance in your wealth. All of these things start to sort of show dividends that purely have come out of your ability to stay present to benevolence and compassion. And of course, the irony is the more that you have to give, the more you have to give. So as there's more abundance, then there's more opportunity to bless the lives of other people around you. If we had more of us doing this, if we could have a collective consciousness, as my vision for EAP talks about, global inner stillness and inner peace and healing, one person at a time. If we were able to have more of us doing this, there would be a greater sense of abundance and giving, and there would be much more joy and peace in our world, both in our personal, intimate experience and in our global experience. Anyway, please take time to give some thought to these other dimensions of gratitude, where I talk about thankfulness and appreciation and returning kindness. If you want to find out more about mindfulness and awareness, have a look at this series on the eapmentor.com webpage, where down the bottom of the page we have the blogs that we've been doing, and you can also go to the blogs up in the index across the top of the web page and have a look at previous blogs. And of course, please go to our Facebook page at EAP Mentor, and we have stuff on there every day that is inspiring and encourage you to be able to engage life in a much more mindful and aware way. Anyway, thank you for being part of this blog series, and we have one more that we'll be doing, which is on compassion and benevolence. Anyway, we'll speak to you then. Bye.